Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome an accomplished professional and author for a second time from London, UK, Mr. Sharath Jeevan, OBE. Sharath, welcome to the show.
Sure, it's great to be back on after a couple of years and really
Thank you.
excited about our conversation.
Thank you. Sharath is an author of a book titled Inflection, a roadmap for leaders at crossroads. He's the chairman of Intrinsic Labs, and he has been recognized amongst the top 10 social entrepreneurs in the UK. So, Sharath, let's start talking about your book, Inflection, a roadmap for leaders at a crossroads. Can you explain what an inflection point is and why is it crucial for leaders to recognize these inflection points?
Thanks, Asher. So one of the things that I really observed, having been a CEO and founder myself, was that not all leadership time is created equal. That when I look back at, I ran an education organization that reached in India about 35,000 schools, about 50,000 schools globally.
Mm.
And yes, day-to-day execution, consistency matters. As a leader, it did matter for me. But actually, there were 4 inflection points during my journey as a leader.
Mm-hmm.
2 of them I handled pretty well, I think, navigated pretty well. 2, I think, not so well with the benefit of hindsight. And I can still trace back the long-term effects of some of those decisions, well after that as well. So I think the reason and the sort of reason for being for the book was that I didn't see a lot out there that was really helping leaders navigate these really critical make or break moments. There's inflection moments where the slope of the angle changes.
Mm.
And my work, I've worked with over 100 leaders now in pretty much every sector, about 20 countries over the last 3 years around their inflection moments, helping them really future-proof their own success. And the book is an attempt to try to bring some of those lessons together in the hope that it'll be of more value to others going through similar moments.
Very interesting. And when I was preparing for my conversation with you, I was interested to see the the DIAL framework that you have developed. So I wanted to ask you to tell me about, or tell my reviewers and listeners about the DIAL framework and how does it help leaders at inflection points?
Yeah, so I think the dial frame, it took me at least 2 or 3 years to develop, actually, from a lot of trial and error.
Mhm.
And I think the reason why inflection moments are so tricky is because you have to navigate the long, medium, and short term.
Mm.
And you see, I'm actually working with a group right now, and you can see there's so much temptation to go for the short-term fix, right? A major crossing is underway, a crossroads,
Mm.
and you think, let me do what's right for the next 6 months, so maybe the next year, if we're lucky.
Mm.
The problem is these have such long-standing effects that it's better to take a 10-year view on that piece. And if you get that long-term piece right, I think of that almost like the hour hand of a watch, and hence the dial framework.
Mm.
I think about it being around long-term direction and perspective.
Mm.
The medium term, the minute hand of the watch is a bit more around potential. Where can we go over the medium term?
Mm.
And the short term is around what we need to achieve now. And a lot of that focuses around staying motivated and resilient through this journey of
Mm.
change.
Mm.
So that long term, medium term, short term, that hour, minute, second hand view, that's the core of the dial framework. And the key is to start long term and work backwards.
Mhm. And is DIAL an acronym or is it not an acronym?
No, so I use it very much around the D being around dare, that daring that new direction, I being around igniting potential, A being around aligning motivations of ourselves and others, and the L being around learning to learn.
Mm.
So yeah, that combination of those makes the BAL framework, actually.
Fascinating. Thank you. Can you also share with me an example of a leader who has successfully navigated an inflection point with courage and conviction?
So I've been working with a group called JKS Restaurant Group, actually, in the UK. In fact, I was with their team yesterday, and it's really interesting. They've been looking at where they want to go in the future. We did some work last year, and already over the past of a year, it's been amazing seeing that increased clarity and focus, and just how they've had some really exciting pieces. They got a second Michelin star for one of their
Mm.
restaurants, and they're trying to bring Indian food globally on the map, and even more on the map, and also incubate new ideas. That's one example. Just take another very different example. I've been working
Mm,
with the B Corp movement around the world. They're really there to help businesses show and demonstrate positive social impact and environmental and governance impact in their work
mm,
beyond purely the profit side. And 3% of GDP in the UK now goes through that movement in just 8 years.
mm,
Already significant amounts of activity in this country are going through it. So we've been looking at what that next mountain is to climb.
mm.
And the key is that it may not just be about getting to 5%. What are those deeper ways the Beacon movement can do that? So again, two very different examples, but just shows how the power and I feel like the versatility of that dial framework can help us in many different sectors and countries as well.
Well said. The other thing that I wanted to get your perspective on was, while inflection points generally at very positive stages, how should leaders approach failure during inflection points?
Yeah, so I think failure is part and parcel of course, of any kind of leadership, actually,
Mm,
as we both know. One of the things that I think comes up a lot with leaders is this balance between what I'd call kind of holding on to the what's taken us and made us successful to this date, and this risk, this courage it takes to almost reinvent ourselves.
mm,
I'm just going through actually a real live example of this with a current client partner I'm working with.
mm,
What I've been trying to say to the leaders in that organization is that it's not like we have to throw away all of the old, as it were. Okay, all of that was useful, it was powerful. It has got us to this place, this very exciting place right now. What we need to do in terms of climbing the next mountain is really be having the courage to reinvent and be bold and really build everything off a fresh perspective on the problem
mm,
overall. Often we can become quite jaded as leaders. We can see things again and again and lose that freshness. A lot of the work I do and the book is all about how we can reconnect with that sense of purpose and perspective and
mm,
re-find a different way of seeing the world that gives us the ability to lead in the first place.
Well said.
Um, yeah, and so I think if we have that, then I think we can, in a way, let go a little bit of some of the baggage that
Mm,
we've taken us so far and be a bit freer in this next chapter as well.
mm. Thank you. And Sharath, what strategies would you recommend for aligning the motivations of diverse stakeholders during an inflection point? Because in organizations, an inflection point may not necessarily be uh, the same for all stakeholders.
Yeah, it's a great point actually. So I think the responsibility for the leader of the organization, let's say the CEO as an example,
Mm,
is to help everyone see the inflection moment in a common language, actually. And I hope the book helps to make a contribution towards that. It's all about how we can really help everyone see the urgency of now. I think usually what I find happens is that most stakeholders, whether board members, investors, executive team, they're aware of the need. Usually the difference is around the urgency of how quickly we need to act. And I've never yet met an organization that has been too urgent. So if generally I think we tend to be a bit more cautious, we tend to wait a bit too long.
mm,
Each time we wait, we eat into our runway, we eat into our freedom and flexibility. So I guess, the faster and earlier we can act, the better. So
right.
even if we perhaps not even over exaggerate is the wrong word, but if we overemphasize an inflection moment, that's a better bias to have than the other one, which is where we play it down.
Mm,
And we've seen, companies like Blockbuster and Netflix as
yeah.
the classic ones. They waited a long time and it was too late by the time they had to, sorry, not Blockbuster versus Netflix or Kodak and so
Yeah.
on. They waited too long before acting, right? And it was then too late.
Mm. And the other thing that I was fascinated was with this phrase called learning to learn. Why is learning to learn a critical skill, and how can leaders develop this?
It's a great question, Trish. So I think that that muscle of lifelong learning is going to be so important for leadership today. It already is very important. And again, I think the number of inflection points and moments is going to increase exponentially.
Mm,
I think of them as sort of almost they're asteroids, like external events. It might be a regulatory change, a political change, change in the market. We've had COVID, we've had, in the West, or actually everywhere, the sort of inflation crisis, all of these things.
mm,
All of these external things are getting faster and more frequent. It's more uncertain. Internally, we're seeing a lot of change where we have new, leadership. Leaders often leave earlier, for example, boards reshape more. teams often their attention challenges and so on.
Mm,
So the starship, the internal ship shifts a lot as well. So in the face of that turbulence, actually being able to learn and reinvent and be willing to keep refining our approach as we go, that becomes a key, I think, capability and an enabler of success as well.
mm.
And so this is all about how to try to navigate that learning muscle as well.
Right, right. And in an era of generative technologies, everyone's talking of Chat GPT and and so many other kinds of other platforms that are coming. How should leaders adapt their strategies?
It's a great question, Asher. So I think that what the big promise, it's not yet realized, but I think it is an exciting promise, is that I think if we can really enable leaders to spend more of the time on that long and medium term,
Mm,
in the dial framework, the hour hand and the minute hand, it would allow a lot more focus on that and that focus on inflection moments overall.
mm,
Right now, a lot of it is just by the sheer necessity of management tasks, just means that we have to we spend so much time in the short term.
mm,
And I think what I hope that AI can do, I've just been working in our National Health Service in the UK, for example, with general practitioners like primary care specialists here. And so much of their time is spent on the day-to-day stuff around managing patient lists, admin, bureaucracy, which in some ways, of course, we need it, compliance, but that would be ideal if AI could take care of most of that for them. And they could spend all of their very hard-earned qualifications and training on the patient experience itself and building that human connection. So I think, I hope this can really help reframe time and reposition time so we
mm.
can spend it better on things that matter as well.
Well said. And Sharath, how important is emotional intelligence in leading through a phase of inflection points?
I think it's really critical, Ashish, because so much of this there's a rational element of this about, what is the right direction strategy when you're facing these crossroads. A lot of it, though, is also understanding how those rational answers link to the motivations of those around us. That's why I think of the A and the dial being that aligned motivations piece,
Mm,
because it might be the best, answer on paper. It might be ideal and robust, but
mm,
it may not be what drives the people in the room, in the metaphorical room, I should say.
mm,
So how to bring that together? So being able to understand people's intrinsic motivation. My first book, of course, was on that. We talked about it a couple of years ago, but
mm,
how to bring that into the leadership discussion
mm.
is one of the areas that I do a lot of work around because it really means that the idea that comes through the direction we take long term is not just like rationally robust and sound, but it's also one that everyone will get behind and be excited by as well.
Fascinating. And what would you say are some of the key elements of effective crisis management when an organization is going through change?
Yeah, so I'd say actually there's a sort of I think there's a VC called Sequoia Capital,
Yeah.
which is a great VC. They're very big in many countries. They have this idea of a crucible moment, which is when you're in that kind of crisis. So a good example in their list is Airbnb. The pandemic hits, no one is allowed to travel. What do you
Mm,
do? Ideally, I do work a lot around those sometimes, but ideally, I try to help my clients avoid getting into those crisis or crucible moments in the first place.
mm,
What's usually happens is you're in a comfortable phase,
mm,
things are going along fine, and you've got that next mountain to climb. If we can get there immediately and take the time to rebuild that, and when things are going well,
mm.
we avoid the crises overall.
Right.
So just first thing is proactive, intentional navigation reflection moments, knowing when the next mountain is there is a better approach. But when we are in a crisis, everything just gets faster. So this reckoning needs to happen quickly. But ironically, I feel like my experience shows that it's even more important to look at the long term. A crisis tends to us to make us think about short term only.
Mm,
Making sure we think about those three time horizons really helps. And that learning muscle, that learning to learn piece we talked about, that
mm,
needs to happen at hyper speed. That's the difference there.
mm. Great response. Thank you. And how important is mentorship to guide leaders during these times of inflection?
Yeah, so I mean that's what had decided to do now full time actually because that need to be there and to accompany them on that journey
Mm,
is really important. Obviously, I can't be with every organization in the world. There are many inflection moments, so the book is an attempt to try and bring some of the ideas so more people can benefit from that overall. The Koreans have a great saying, which is even the best barbers should never cut their own hair.
Mm,
And so, we can be a great leader, but that when we're in the heart of the ring and the punches are landing and so on as well, it's very hard to step back and be objective, reconnect with what matters to us,
yeah.
bring our teams along. So, yeah, I'd really recommend, if possible, having someone trusted around you
Mm,
that can really help and guide through the process. But also, I hope the book will have some frameworks and tools that will just allow us to add structure to this if we're navigating one ourselves.
mm,
But maybe in an organization, but also in our own lives sometimes, if it's a,
right.
a career inflection moment also.
Right. And I'd love to get your perspective on the role of inclusivity in an organization to guide, leaders.
So I think one of the things that I find really interesting, and that's why I think of, the Ignite Potential piece and on Dial the I.
Mm,
When we're at inflection moments, there's no room to leave any potential behind,
mm,
right? Because the stakes are high, we've got to move decisively. You can't sort of let, half the organization be, um, half on there and so on as well.
mm,
So one of the things I would just say is whether there is a way to think about the that idea of it almost creates a lot of impetus around that need to create
mm,
inclusivity, because we have to make sure everyone is really fully on board and
mm,
achieving their talents and potential. So
right.
some of the ideas in the book around how we can build what I call the elements of authenticity, connection, excellence into a culture.
Mm,
And it's in a way a different way of reframing inclusivity. It's about everyone being the best version of themselves, everyone feeling deeply connected to the work, and everyone feeling there's a high bar of excellence around their work itself.
mm,
Yeah, so I think it's absolutely critical. And I think those moments often can be great triggers for us to create those cultures if they're not already fully there.
mm. Okay. And how do inflection points impact an organization's culture? And how should leaders respond?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that is really important about culture is that often I think we've started to build often very good cultures in organizations, such as, but often not aligned fully to the direction we're taking. And a lot of the idea in the book is that we need to tightly align direction
Mm,
with culture and with potential.
mm,
They have to go hand in glove. And the culture we want to build is entirely almost dependent on the kind of direction we're taking.
mm,
So what might be a very nice culture in one organization may not work at all in a different one that's taking a different direction, even in the same sector, the same field.
right.
So really sort of really aligning and tightly knitting these two things together is, I found, an incredibly important building block. So the key message, I think, it's not just about building a positive culture. That can mean lots of different things.
Mm,
Is it positive in terms of achieving the direction we really believe in and the perspective that underlies that direction overall?
mm. Thank you. So I have time for two more questions for you. Uh, my next question is that, the start of our conversation, you said you must have spoken to over 100 leaders. What differences have you noticed in how leaders from different parts of the world or different parts of different geographies handle inflection points?
Yeah, so I've actually been able to work very deeply with 100 leaders, actually, and some of them I mentioned in the book, and it's been lovely to get to know them individually.
Mm,
What I've started to do now is to bring them together about 4 times a year. A significant number are in India, but also in all over the place as well, in different sectors, from corporates to arts and nonprofit organizations to
mm,
government organizations, VC funds, etc., entrepreneurs. And so one of the things that I'm finding is that having conversations between leaders around their inflection moments
mm,
can really bring a broader perspective. It's quite easy to go into a mindset that says, I work in a certain sector and all I know and all that matters is my own
mm,
sector experience. Those actually, if we can step back and look at a different sector, the dynamics are actually very similar. And
mm.
that can give us that fresh eyes, that give us that unique perspective to set our direction in the first place. So I
Right.
found these meetings really powerful, and just really catalytic to enabling that those conversations to happen across
Mm.
sectors as well.
Fascinating. And my last question to you, given the amount of work you've done on inflection, I want you to look at your crystal ball and say, what future inflection points, in your opinion, should leaders be preparing for?
So I'm starting writing a third book, Ashdus, and it's
Okay.
about this idea. Oh, it's actually exactly on this question, and I think it's the one that really is on my mind quite deeply is around the generational inflection moment right now.
Mm,
And not enough has been written about it, I think, in my view. And
mm,
I'm very conscious of this question of generational equity and how do we in this generation pass on things responsibly to the next one.
mm,
It feels like in my language, you have personal inflection moments, you have organizational ones. This feels like a societal one and a
mm,
ticking time bomb in the West, where our populations are aging very rapidly. But even in, let's say, in India, Africa, places where we have very young populations, there's another set of dynamics there. What I'm exploring in the book is going to be about what do we need to do as a current leadership generation to pass the baton on well and responsibly,
mm.
both in our sort of work lives and our personal lives. For example, as parents and citizens as well. So yeah, I'm starting to think quite deeply about that area
Mm.
as I think about this third book.
Well, good luck with your book, and we'll schedule another conversation with you when you come out with your third book. But Sharath, on that note, thank you so much for speaking to me about Inflection, about your book, Inflection, a roadmap for leaders at a crossroads. I'm going to ask all our viewers and listeners to go and check out Mr. Sharath Jeevan's book. I will go and check it out myself. Thank you for giving me so many different perspectives on inflection. Sometimes I wonder whether this is a new phrase that's going to come into the world, like blue ocean strategy or something similar. But I think you're onto something really powerful. Thank you for speaking to me about dial, about learning to learn, about crisis management, about failure, and about uh, what you're going to be looking at, which is generational inflection that I think the whole world is facing. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thanks, Ashish.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.